Welcome to the Subjective Professor podcast, where we reject coercion and hypocrisy. It's Wednesday, April 30th, 2025, episode 375, and we're going to talk about Universe 25 mouse experiment. All right, so Universe 25, I saw this meme and I thought it was interesting. And so I did a little bit of reading and, um, I had some thoughts, and then when I found an article that pretty much was in line with what I was thinking. So, the meme about Universe 25. It goes like this. This is the writing on the meme. I've seen it several times before, but I saw it again this time, and it made me think of a few things, which I will share with you in this episode. So, here it goes. In 1968, researcher John B. Calhoun conducted a famous experiment known as Universe 25, in which he created a mouse utopia with unlimited food, water, and no predators. At first, the mouse population grew rapidly, but as overcrowding increased, their social behaviors began to deteriorate. Mice formed aggressive cliques, mothers neglected or attacked their offspring, and some individuals became isolated and apathetic. Despite the continued abundance of resources, reproduction eventually ceased altogether, and the population collapsed to extinction. Calhoun described this phenomena as behavioral sink, suggesting that social breakdown rather than material scarcity was responsible for the collapse. All right, so that's what's the script on the meme. And I thought, whoa, okay, so this is where this whole fear of overpopulation comes from, right? From this 1968 experiment. But then I thought, yeah, but this was just an experiment with mice, right? And so this can't translate easily into people, which is what the implication is, right? You can't experiment on people, so you experiment on mice, and whatever the mice do, that's what people are going to do. That's kind of the mindset. Anyway, so I Googled the research, the Universe 25 experiment, and I got a article from the Scientist Digest, TS Digest, May 2022. And the title is Universe 25 Experiment by Annie Melchor, Melchor. Um, so right away, after giving a summary of the experiment, she talks about some of the problems like anthropomorphizing findings. That is, directly reading human dynamics into the experiment. So these are mice, but people act just like mice, right? That's sort of the mentality. And the population growth fear, overpopulation fear, was a thing in the 1970s, 60s, and 70s. There was a Star Trek original series episode called The Mark of Gideon, right? And basically, this planet Gideon, they got overcrowded. And so they decided to control the population with disease, just thin out the population by spreading a disease. Then I remember there was a movie called Soylent Green. I remember, but with Charleston Heston. And it was a 1973 movie, which I think I saw. Back in those days, they put movies on TV, uh, a lot of movies on TV, and I was able to watch it. And I was horrified. I was thinking, this can't be the future. Certainly not, especially when you realize what Soylent Green was. And I remember recently seeing someone selling a product called Soylent Green, which I thought was very bizarre considering Soylent Green in the movie was made from questionable materials. Anyway, but that was an overpopulation movie, which where there, the overpopulation caused food shortages. All right. So Calhoun, he himself didn't really make the overpopulation argument for the world, but he wanted to show the problems of overpopulation in a closed environment, such as a prison, right? Where the people there don't really have the option of creating new living spaces, putting up dividers where they want for privacy. They have no worry for food and for shelter, but everything else is not in their control. And so he wanted people to realize that by having overcrowding in prisons, you're going to have really bad results, consequences. And so he wanted that to be addressed. Now, the writer, Annie Melker, she raised problems with the experiment itself, that there was an objectivity problem, that is reading human behavior into mouse behavior. Uh, so the bias. And then there's also, there were a couple other problems that she pointed out. I failed to write them down, but obviously to not be able to take into consideration that humans are in fact different than mice. Now, I personally also believe that people are better than mice, right? People can think, build, explore beyond just simply the limitation of being put in a utopia. Also, I've been to Korea, and there the population density is insane. Um, you, the the desire for privacy is ever present and also impossible. So if you want to go to a mountaintop, rest assured there will be a crowd at the mountaintop. You want to go to a private place in a park, a quiet place, excuse me, a quiet place in a park. Yeah, there'll be thousands of people there as well. And it's not like there's a event or a function, a celebrity is going to show up. No, it's just that there's no place else to go. All right. It's crazy. So you might have also seen uh, images or videos where people are trying to get onto the subway and they pack them in, right? There's hardly any seats, so everyone is standing, but they try to pack you in, right? And so they even have people called pushmen. So the last 20 people trying to squeeze into that door. And so to help them, you have a bunch of guys that get a running start and then push the people who are sticking out of the doors into the car, subway car, so that the doors can close. Okay. That's how bad it is, right? If you're riding a bus, a city bus, and they don't drive slow, if they're able to pick up some speed, they whip around the turns pretty quickly. But you don't have to hold on to anything because there are so many people in the bus. You can't fall down. It's impossible to fall down. Which, basically, I just started taking taxis everywhere. I just could not stand being around so many people all the time. But yeah, there was privacy is really, really expensive, which is why you pay for it by the hour, if you know what I mean. All right. So these days, though, when you go over to Korea, there is a birth rate problem. They say that Korea has the lowest birth rate in the entire world, which is kind of crazy. And so maybe people would say, aha, see, birth rate is affected. But I would think that it's more than that, right? Not only are there cycles, but I think that the material wealth that Korea has suddenly discovered and the corruption of values because of Western influence, particularly the United States, playing a major role in the government and the governmental processes in that country, I think has done its fair share of the damage as well. But now that you have a lot of people struggling for a lot of their lives, or their parents were struggling, and now there's a lot of wealth. And so now they want to live in the way that they see on TV. I don't know if you watch K-dramas. I don't, but a lot of people apparently do. And then you have the whole Korean pop culture, K-pop. A lot of people want to live the dream, and they can't be slowed down by a family, by children. That's just too much responsibility that they just do not want. So I think there are a lot of contributing factors to the low birth rate. While I was over there, um, I did make observations to people that the Korean people as a whole too easily discard their cultural values for trendy things. And one could make the argument that it happens here in America as well, but the American sort of general cultural vibe is still there, right? It's just the way it's details on the margin. But in Korea, I mean, they really do uh, sort of discard tradition, history, just to be more modern, right? So there was a tourist island over there. It's called Jeju. And people who go there, they want to see some of the old school buildings and things of this nature, but they destroyed them all to put up fancy Western style hotels. And I thought that that was kind of sad, but you can't ignore the fact that real estate is so scarce that if you do have some real estate, you're going to build as high and deep as possible to take full advantage of that small piece of real estate that you have, right? So if you only have a piece of real estate that we'll call it a third of an acre or something like that, well, you're going to put a 20-story building on that third of an acre, and you're going to basically have build it right up to the building next to it to take full advantage of every single centimeter that's yours, right? And you're also going to have three, four, five levels of basement as well, because that's your land as well. So that's kind of what I mean. People are going to try to find ways to create space to cope with what's going on. Um, but overpopulation or having a growing population would be a problem if government was dictating policy. It's no secret that as a country gets wealthier, the birth rate declines. Maybe that has to do with inflation, but I'm just speaking off the cuff, some subjective ideas that might undermine an argument that some people may or may not have. But I thought it was interesting that the globalists are trying to exercise population control, whether by food, perhaps by drugs, perhaps by war. But people generally find a way to create more space, like seasteading. And I think that as we move forward, we really don't have to worry too much about overpopulation as long as we respect property rights and have freedom and have honest money. Because in that situation, creativity and innovation will provide the solutions that we need to get over the next hump. We don't need genocide. We don't need experimentation. We don't need war, which takes me to the next topic, right? So I was watching Judge Napolitano's conversation with Phil Giraldi, and they mentioned this reporter, Medea Benjamin of Code Pink. I know nothing about Code Pink, but it was just really interesting when he shared a video of Medea Benjamin approaching Nancy Mace, a Republican representative of South Carolina, and also a clip of her confronting Ben-Gvir, who is high in the Israeli government, but who's also a convicted war criminal. And so when she confronts Nancy Mace, these are two different situations. It was just showing the video of how gutsy this Medea Benjamin is, because I don't think she's that big of a woman, But man, I gotta confess, I don't think I'd be able to do what she does. So props to her. But anyway, she goes up to Mace and asks her about the genocide in Palestine. Fair question. But Mace just replies, "You are a self-hating Jew." And a self-hating Jew is basically a Jew who is not a Zionist and therefore opposes the genocide that's happening in Gaza. I mean, everyone knows it's a genocide. We're just not allowed to say it publicly, right? And so when you see people like Nancy Mace, and I think there are many Americans who share her view, it's a very interesting, narrow subjectivity, right? So they focus on a very narrow sliver of reality so that they don't see anything else, like the killing of Palestinian children, babies, right? Not going to think about it, right? Because I'm focused on only the attack on that happened by Hamas on Israel on October 7th, right? And so they're going to focus only on that so everything else can be ignored. Now, keeping in mind that, yes, I realize people have died on both sides, more on one side than the other. But if you take a step back, um, basically what you're seeing is blind racism. Blind racism, which leads to genocide or slavery, call it whatever you want, war, um, where it's basically it's blind racism, which results in massive death. Um, Keeping in mind also that many of the Israelis that died on October 7th was killed by their own government, right? Because they don't want to have to negotiate for them back. So easier just to kill them as the Hamas is trying to get away. But the big question I always had right from day one was where was the military on October 7th? How did Hamas just walk right over the border? And I heard someone say it is the most, what do you call it? Observed, monitored border in the world, and they let them come in and cause havoc for hours. I don't buy it. Not for a second do I buy that. And so I think there's much more to the story, but you're not even people who have the narrow subjectivity are not even going to question the narrative. They're not even going to question what they believe is true. Right? And you see this again, this sort of racialization acting on the stereotype with very little understanding of the details and the complexity of the situation, even the history of the situation that they claim to know enough about. Um, but to call someone a self-hating Jew, that is very interesting. Um, and it reminded me of being called a self-hating Korean, or the way that it was said to me was a Korean who hates other Koreans. That was me. That was the way people uh, addressed me when I was a lot younger, a younger man. And I heard that a lot. So I was born in the United States prior to the immigration law change. The Johnson-Reed Act was repealed. I was born before that, the repealing of that law. And so there were very, very few Koreans, and it was just weird for me, right, to see other Koreans who were not in my family. It was just they were just odd. Like it was so rare to see it that when I did, I just thought it was the weirdest thing. I was uncomfortable around other Koreans because I never really saw them during the weekdays. I would see them at church on Sunday, but otherwise, and when I was young in elementary school, seeing other kids at church just meant it was time for me to get beat up by these much older, much bigger kids who just simply hated me, hated every aspect of my being. And I think a lot of it had to do with the fact that I spoke English fluently. And what they didn't know was I was really jealous of the fact that they could speak Korean fluently, right? But they didn't let me have the opportunity to improve my Korean because they were just busy punching me. So I readily adapted the assimilationist mentality, right? I disliked everything Korean. Even my parents, most of the time. So my parents taught me the language, but on top of that, they didn't really teach us much about Korean culture. And what I saw of Korean culture, none of it, I liked none of it. And I wanted to basically excise any kind of Korean from my entire life, right? Whatever Korean would typically do, I would never do that, right? So it was that kind of, it was pretty bad. Then I lived in Korea for 3 years, and I began to understand why the culture prioritized certain things over others, right? But things like seniority, right? If you were someone is older, or if they were at a job for longer, or they were doing something for longer, right? Seniority in every micro subtle way would mean dominance over others. So people look for ways that they can get seniority over other people. And so submission to these rules of seniority really irked me because it didn't look at ability. It didn't look at work actually being done. I mean, it was all about the seniority, and even covering up lies. Someone could even say something that's blatantly wrong. You are not allowed to correct them. And I find out later that there is a better way to just simply yelling, "You're wrong," which is kind of what I did a couple times. I was in grad school when I was over there, and if you want to know, and just like in America, some of the most arrogant people are scholars, right? They don't like being told that they're wrong about anything. So anyway, what I began to realize was that if you call some, right, so fast forward back to America, when people would call you a Korean hating Korean, right, or a self-hating Korean, you're basically shutting down the conversation because it's not about right or wrong, better or worse. These kinds of conversations are always about preference, right? And how much information you know and how you're comfortable you are with those practices and how aware you are of the different cultures. So to call someone, though, a self-hating Jew or a self-hating Korean is to end the conversation. So you're covering up something, right? You're censoring. And censorship is always the protection for bad ideas. And so, what are the bad ideas? For the Jews, perhaps it's national policy. Maybe it's the genocide. Maybe it's all this information of how many people of the IDF died so far. Again, uh, to call someone a name is not a conversation and it's not a discussion. And so again, it spills over into the university situation where university desires to eradicate anyone who doesn't toe the line, who doesn't repeat the same information as everybody else. But that, to me, was never the university what it was supposed to be for. And I did everything to try to stay employed. I was successful for 18 years, but then someone finally got me. They put me in a vulnerable position, and my contract was not renewed. So if that kind of person who would use expressions like self-hating Korean, if they are successful, then we have a dystopia, right? Everyone has to try to conform to whatever whose vision, the person in power's vision, and to engage in this kind of behavior of calling other people self-hating is a symptom of a sickness. I don't know what that sickness is. Perhaps it's narrow subjectivity sickness. Maybe there's something in the water, which is code for drugs. Okay. But just like self-hating Korean is code for self-hating Jew, but hopefully enough people have woken up to the reality that there's something seriously wrong with our society, that simple logic can't be followed, that just having a friendly conversation is no longer permitted, right? You're either right or you're wrong. It's just a very bizarre world that we live in. And looking at it now and taking all my other comments into consideration that I've said since Trump was elected, I think I was excited for the things that he said he was going to do, like cut military spending by 50%. I mean, come on. But now I think Trump, all he has done so far was guarantee a woke Democrat in the White House in 2028. So, which inspires me to talk about freedom even more, right? We gotta wake people up. And I think that a lot of the kids where I'm teaching now, first, I don't know, they really like the concepts of freedom, at least when we talk about it, right? It's obvious that freedom is the way to go. So hopefully you are successful as well in wherever you are with the people you are conversing with the people you care about. And I don't know if it helps to share these videos with them. As I told you before, a lot of my students, they would watch these videos with their parents, which I thought was a fantastic bridge making opportunity with people that they normally didn't really, or they stopped talking to. So it was a great thing. And maybe share, like, if you will. But anyway, I appreciate you guys listening, and I'll talk to you next time.